The moment they fired Daniel, he was standing beside a poor old man with nothing but a loaf of bread in his hands. The store manager pointed toward the exit while customers watched in silence, and Daniel stood there with tears in his eyes, holding the mop that had been his only source of income. He had spent years cleaning floors that others walked across without noticing him, but that morning, he had made one choice that would change his life forever. He chose kindness over a paycheck. What nobody knew was that the helpless old man everyone had ignored was hiding a secret worth billions. Before we continue, if you believe in humanity, second chances, and the power of kindness, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Humanity Tales for more emotional stories that remind us that a good heart can change everything. Daniel was 32 years old and had learned early in life that dignity did not come from expensive clothes or a prestigious job. He lived in a tiny rented room above an old repair shop, where the ceiling leaked whenever it rained. Every morning before sunrise, he walked nearly an hour to reach the supermarket where he worked as a cleaner. His uniform was faded, his shoes were worn out, and his hands were rough from years of hard work. But Daniel never complained. His mother depended on him for medicine, and his younger sister was still studying. Losing his job was not something he could afford. The supermarket was owned by a successful regional company, and its manager, Victor, cared deeply about appearances. He wanted spotless floors, perfect shelves, and employees who never slowed down the business. Customers who looked wealthy were treated like royalty, while people who appeared poor were often ignored. Daniel had noticed it many times, but he kept his head down and did his work. He believed that one person's behavior could not change the whole world, but perhaps it could change one person's day. That morning, an elderly man entered the supermarket wearing a faded blue shirt and worn trousers. His gray hair was messy, and he walked slowly with the help of an old wooden cane. Several customers glanced at him before moving away. At the checkout counter, the old man carefully counted a few coins in his trembling hand. He had enough for a loaf of bread, but when he tried to pay, one coin slipped from his fingers and rolled across the floor. The cashier sighed impatiently. The customers behind him began complaining about the delay. The old man bent down, but his knees would not cooperate. Before anyone could help, Daniel dropped his mop and rushed over. He picked up the coin, helped the man stand, and noticed that the old man's hands were shaking badly. Daniel quietly asked whether he was feeling all right. The old man smiled weakly and said he had not eaten since the previous day. Daniel looked at the loaf of bread in the man's basket. Then he looked at his own lunch bag. Inside was the simple meal he had packed for himself. Without hesitation, Daniel gave the man his lunch. The old man tried to refuse, but Daniel insisted. He even paid for the bread himself. It was only a few dollars, but for Daniel, it meant going hungry until the next morning. He did not care. He had seen too many people pretend not to notice suffering. Unfortunately, Victor had seen everything. Instead of praising Daniel, the manager stormed toward him. He accused Daniel of wasting company time, interfering with customers, and giving away merchandise without permission. Daniel tried to explain that he had paid for the bread himself, but Victor refused to listen. In front of everyone, he told Daniel that employees were hired to work, not to play hero. Then came the words Daniel feared most. He was fired. The store suddenly felt silent. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the manager. His mother's medicine was due that evening. His sister needed money for school. He wanted to defend himself, but something inside him told him not to argue. He simply removed his name badge, placed it on the counter, and walked toward the exit. Outside, Daniel sat on a bench beneath the gray morning sky. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry. He wasn't crying because he was ashamed of being a cleaner. He was crying because he had done what he believed was right, yet kindness had cost him the one thing his family depended on. Then he heard footsteps behind him. It was the old man. Daniel wiped his eyes and stood up, but the elderly stranger placed a hand gently on his shoulder. He thanked Daniel for treating him like a human being when everyone else had treated him like an inconvenience. Daniel smiled sadly and told him he had done nothing special. The old man simply replied that sometimes the smallest act of kindness reveals the biggest heart. Then he walked away. Daniel thought that was the end of their meeting. He was wrong. The next morning, the supermarket was unusually crowded. Expensive cars filled the parking lot, and several executives in dark suits entered through the front doors. Victor hurried toward them with a nervous smile, wondering what important customer had arrived. Then the entire store fell silent. The elderly man from the previous day walked through the entrance, but this time he was wearing a tailored suit. Behind him were lawyers, financial advisors, and senior executives. Cameras followed him as he entered. Victor's face turned pale. The man was Mr. Samuel Hart, the founder and majority owner of the company that owned the supermarket chain. He wasn't a homeless man. He wasn't helpless. He was a billionaire who had deliberately dressed simply and visited one of his stores to see how ordinary customers were treated. Samuel had watched everything. He had seen employees ignore him. He had seen the cashier become impatient. But most importantly, he had seen Daniel give away his own food to a stranger without expecting anything in return. Samuel called Daniel back to the store. Daniel arrived wearing the same worn clothes, expecting perhaps an apology. Instead, Samuel stood before him and publicly admitted that the company had failed him. He explained that Daniel had demonstrated something money could never purchase: genuine compassion. Victor was removed from his management position after an investigation into how employees and customers were being treated. The cashier was given additional training, and the company introduced a new policy requiring employees to report situations where vulnerable customers needed assistance rather than simply ignoring them. But Samuel didn't stop there. He offered Daniel a new position overseeing customer care and community assistance programs across the supermarket chain. Daniel accepted, but only after asking whether he could continue helping people who were struggling. Samuel smiled and told him that was exactly why he had chosen him. Months later, Daniel's life looked completely different. His mother received proper medical care. His sister continued her education. Daniel moved his family into a modest but comfortable home. Yet despite everything that changed, he never forgot the old man sitting outside the supermarket with a loaf of bread. One afternoon, Daniel returned to that same store and saw an elderly customer struggling with a heavy bag. Before anyone could react, he walked over and helped him. Because Daniel had learned something that no salary, title, or fortune could teach him. A person's value is not measured by the clothes they wear, the money in their bank account, or the position written on their name badge. Sometimes the richest person in a room is the one willing to give when they have the least. And sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is the very person capable of changing everything. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Humanity Tales. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need a little hope. Before the ending, comment, "Kindness always wins," if you believe we should never judge someone by their appearance or social status. Daniel never became wealthy because he helped the old man. He became successful because, even when he had almost nothing, he refused to stop being kind. And that was worth more than billions. The end.